Damon Zumbroegel, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here.
For audiences who don't know you, would you mind introducing yourself, what it is that you do, a little bit about your background?
Sure. My name's Damon. I'm originally from Lake Tahoe, California. I grew up in a little bit of a different situation. My parents were 17 and 18 when they had me in the summer of 1969. So they both ran away from home in 67, moved to San Francisco in 68, and I was born in the summer of 69. So I'm quite literally the seed of this entire movement that happened, incredible movement coming out of the 60s in San Francisco. I then grew up in a very different world. I grew up half in San Francisco in a very, let's say, ghetto world. The streets of San Francisco with drugs and all the stuff going on. And the other half of my life was in the hills of Lake Tahoe, so in the mountains. So I was getting these two very dynamic worlds as I was growing up. Then we moved full-time to Tahoe, and my entire life was playing in the woods and building forts. And so when the time came to say, what are you going to do in life? I thought, I'll just build forts. No? And that turned out to be architecture. And I, from an early age, maybe 9, 10 years old, I knew I wanted to be an architect. My dad's a builder. My granddad's a builder. My great-granddad was an architect. It's just been in the family. And so I'm carrying on this sort of family tradition, but it comes from somewhere deeper inside of me. I've always just been it. So I figured if I could just go build forts for people and they would pay me, then that would be the best job for me. Turns out I build forts for people and they pay me. And that's called being an architect. And so when I was very young, the age of 15, living in California, you don't get to see much inspiration in the world of architecture. So I made it a point to move to Europe. And how I did that was I started some of the first snowboards on Earth. So I took my skateboard in 1983 and I took the bindings off and I put on water ski bindings and I started going down hills in the snow. Little did I know that was going to turn into something that was one day in the Olympics. But at the time, it was just so fascinating to be from a ski town, loved to skate all summer, and then snow would come around and we didn't have anything to do. So we just made snowboards out of our skateboards. It was just what you would do. It became big. All the snowboard companies called me and I realized this was something. So at 14, I started the first skateboard and snowboard shop in Northern California. And I started a skate team. I designed all the product, all the branding, 14 years old. And it did really, really well. And it made me quite a bit of money, enough to send myself to Europe to study churches. So I moved to Germany for a year when I was 15 to 16 and just went to all the churches I could go to in Europe and just sort of reveling in the life of Europe. How did life before American life happen? And that sort of set the precedent for the rest of my days on Earth. It was go from that to try to figure out how to get into college. I didn't have anybody supporting me, so it was make it. Do it however you need to do it. Get a full-time job. Work your ass off. In college, I spent a lot of time homeless, so I'd live in the studio, put my bed there. Everybody would leave at night. I'd go to sleep and wake up before everybody'd get there. I just did whatever I could to be an architect. And in turn, that opened my life up to all the other possibilities because architecture is music. Architecture is poetry. Architecture is the art of living. Architecture is being Le Corbusier and painting naked on your porch. And when I started to really see into the precedents of my world, starting with, say, Michelangelo and Leonardo, all the way to Le Corbusier and Mies van der Rohe and Frank Lloyd Wright, to the modern masters of Renzo Piano and Tadao Ando and Calatrava, I thought these people are living the life I live. And from that life, they pull out architecture. So I went around the world and studied those folks. Went to all the Calatrava buildings, all the Frank Lloyd Wright buildings, Corbusier buildings. And it turns out by being the life of the architect, really good architecture comes out. And I stuck to it. Here I am now, 40 years later, with a damn good career under my belt.
And you're currently doing a pilgrimage through the East right now. You're actually in Nepal as we're recording this. What are you doing? Well, what is this? What is this journey you're on?
For thousands of years, the East and the West have been sort of separate. And the East has been sort of bubbling in spirituality. And the West sort of got shut down when the white people came from Europe and moved to North America. It shut down the spirituality, the connection to nature. Very young in my career, I invested myself heavily in the Eastern traditions. And in the Eastern traditions, a pilgrimage, a journey of a human being, is a really big deal. And so for years and years and years, I've been teaching retreats on this pilgrimage, this ancient pilgrimage, which follows the chakras through India up into the Himalayas. And I teach different parts in India, and I teach a part in Burma, and I teach a part in Nepal. And this year, I just decided I would actually do it. I've walked with the sadhus from Nepal up into the holy mountains with no shoes on. But I've never done the whole thing. So I went to the bottom of India to the root chakra, and I bought a Royal Enfield Himalayan motorcycle. And I've been literally riding up through the chakras of India, following the heat, because as it gets hot, I move, just like in the old days when people were doing it walking. I'm following the moon, so I'm letting the moon and the full moon and the new moon dictate when I leave and when I stay. And the point was to get all the way from the root chakra, the Muladharam, all the way to the crown chakra, which is in the high Himalayas, Muktanath and Mount Kailash. And I'm at the crown chakra now. So I've made it 3 months up through all the chakras of India. And now I'm in the crown chakra of Nepal. Ancient, thousands of years old pilgrimage. I think this is really important for human beings. So that's what I'm doing right now is I'm on a motorcycle pilgrimage from India into the Himalayas. Fantastic.
When you say that spirituality is dying in the West, what is that you mean by that? And then why do you think that that's happening? Because I know that there are a lot of people in the West currently who would probably echo that. They might not be Buddhist. Usually it's Christians. But the Christians echo a very similar sentiment that there is to put it in the Nietzschean term, a death of God. Why do you think that is? And why do you think it's on the rise in the East?
Well, I'm not sure there was a death in spirituality. The death in spirituality would be when the native population that had been in North America for tens of thousands of years was, let's just say, eliminated. And with it was their spirituality, their connection to the earth. And that is really spirituality. When we connect to the earth, we connect to ourselves. That's spirituality. All the religions I see on earth are just pointing in. Just get in and really use that as this compassionate device to be connected to all things. I think when the first people came to North America, what they wanted was that freedom to have that kind of spirituality. I think over the years, that freedom has turned more into dogma and has been more and more shut down. And I think Christianity, being the main religion of the West, over the years, it's gotten itself into a place where it isn't much freedom involved anymore. And I think the spirit of it is so wholesome, but the way it is contained and the way that the rules say has really made people wonder what they're actually doing. So I think there's this time of confusion. In the East, The rishis here in India sang 7,000 years ago, right? To remind people to be who you are, to stay connected with the earth. People were starting to band up in cities. They weren't living the old life anymore. And that separated them from nature, and it separated them from themselves. So the rishis started to sing to bring them back. And that was the inspiration, the beginning of the Vedic traditions. And now we have Hindu, right? From that came the Buddha Dharma, right? The Buddha and his teachings. That still exists here in the East because the lineage has never been broken. From one person to 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 one person for 7,000 years without any break. I don't know very many places in the world that have that. And so there is still something wholesome here. Now, I'm not saying India in general is spiritual. No, it's starting to be a little bit more like the West, where Hindu is something you do on Sundays and you pray really hard when you get in trouble. But there is still the depth spirituality here, which is this deep connection to our being, deep connection to all things. And so it always interests me to see something pure like that. If I couldn't see it in North America because it was decimated, then I came to the East. And so I think it's a really beautiful situation right now where the West is sort of going into the future with modern and technology and what they believe is evolution. And the East is steeped in tradition and evolution and spirituality, but they lack the technology and the things we have in the West. So we're both lacking what each other are so good at. So I'm trying to be this sort of middleman between the two and sort of open the door for each one of them through the architecture, through the music, through the spiritual teachings, whatever it may be. So I think that's really what I was saying. It isn't that it's been decapitated in the West. It's just been so watered down that I think people wonder what they're doing anymore. And I think that's happening in the East as well.
Hmm. On architecture, there is a good case to be made, and a case I actually, to betray my own bias for a moment, a case I actually agree with, that architecture is the most important art form in the world because it's an art form you can't escape. Like when I walk down the downtown square in the United States, I have no choice but to be surrounded by the buildings that I look at. It's different than music. I can choose to turn music off. I can choose to not walk into an art gallery. But architecture is there and it's imposing. And there's a few points I want to extrapolate on from that. But earlier you had said that you were fascinated by churches in Europe. What was it about the church specifically, or I should say the church architecture, that was so attractive to you?
I think you bring up some really good points. And I'll start with there's 4 requisites to a human life. You know? Food, shelter, clothing, and medicine. Well, shelter is very important. It's right up there with food, clothing, and medicine, the most important things we need to live. I think the architect is maybe the most noble profession on the earth. And as you said, it's because we actually shelter people. You can't get away from it. We define how lives are made. And that's a huge responsibility. And when I said I went to Europe to study the churches and to study the architects, the precedent architects that I needed to sort of see into, it was to find an architecture that was still believable. I walked into the Duomo in Siena and I couldn't get past the doorway because there's these 2 carved pillars on either side. And I just stood there. I cry a lot and cried. And it was like God was playing music for my soul. And I looked at these carvings of these pillars And then I found out it was 3 generations of the same carving family to complete one pillar. So a man carved that pillar his whole life for God. Then his son carved on that pillar his whole life for God. Then that man's son continued and carved that pillar his whole life as well. 3 generations of purity in one pillar. That's a door I want to walk through. No? That there was something more beautiful uh, that architecture could do. That's what I wanted to find. And I couldn't find it in America. No, I couldn't find it in strip malls and McDonald's. And I needed to go somewhere where I could feel the passion of the art. To walk up and see a Michelangelo sculpture. Voila. And it was that feeling that I knew was out there. And I couldn't get it in America. I could get it with the old trees. I could get it sitting next to the river, but why couldn't I get it when man made something? What was what was what was lacking there? What was the disconnect? Where did man leave nature and leave spirit and start just building crap? And so at 15, that was a huge issue for me. And that's my impetus to move to Europe, just to see things that were real, to believe in something, to start a career with a solid foundation. It's like when we build a house, the foundation's got to be nut on. No? It's going to be in the dirt. Nobody's going to see it. But if that foundation's just a little bit off, by the time we get to the roof, it's going to be a lot off. And I felt that way about my life. If I could start it based in something that was real for me, something that was real for my predecessors, something that was real during the age of Michelangelo, something that was real in the dark ages, something that was real in the thousands of years that I see these pictures. I needed to find that before I started my career. And so that was the impetus to get into it, to actually know why I'm an architect, to actually believe myself in the noble profession that I was entering into.
Yeah, and to your point, one of the as an American, and I love my country, and I preface that because it is a wonderful country. It's also a very easy country to criticize. One of the things that I find unbelievably frustrating about so much of the architecture here is that it is based around utilitarianism. So it's just
Mm,
I mean, the architectural style, although not, I think, intentionally done, is very reminiscent of brutalism. This sort of hollow, cold, drab. There's no detail. It's just function. I saw on X there was a thread of what park benches used to look like in America versus what they look like now, where there were these
mm,
beautiful wooden carvings. They were very inviting. They looked beautiful in parks. And now there's these sort of metal seats. And in churches, one of the interesting things, and I want to get your take on this, because you also mentioned music as related to architecture. I think of somebody like Bach, who was composing for churches, and uh, the music that he wrote was inspired by I think in part, the buildings that he was occupying. And I would be curious to know your thoughts on the relationship between uh, beautiful buildings and other forms of art versus ugly buildings like brutalism.
mm. I think you're spot on in so many ways, and that's almost a three-part question. I think the first part is what happened? Now, if we look back into America, craftsman style, things were done well. The details were there. Um, Someone might say, well, they brought in all the craftsmen from Europe. So what? We're all from somewhere else in America, right? That's who cares where they brought them in from. But there was a time in America where detail and the human interaction with the architecture, with the bench, with the door handle meant something. Huh? Something happened after World War II and the 50s came in, and we brought in this style from Europe called modernism, right? They didn't name it that. Bauhaus didn't name it that. Corbu didn't name it that. Mies van der Rohe didn't name it that. We named it that. And what we did is we saw it in the West and we said, oh, if that's good architecture, we can do that. It's called box doors. No, it's not modern architecture, what they started to build. So there was this serious decline that started to happen. I think you can see it in the way we made anything, from cars to park benches to churches. Over time, the degradation of architecture just continued. Modernism got this horrible name. They just call anything that looks sort of bleak and ugly modernist. No, and it's different from brutalism. It's modernism. And then we're at a point now where the architect has no place in society anymore. Honestly, we're just the person who draws the plans and does the permits now. But back in the old days, the architect was one of the most respected beings in the community, because they were making shelter. They were making the things we touch. They were making the ways we move. When that disconnect happened in the West, the downfall was swift and hard. And we've ended up now 2025 with more rules and regulations. We have value engineering. People say time is money, space is money. All those things have become normal. So for an architect in the West, do anything good these days, you have to fight tooth and nail just to make it happen. I was teaching with Glenn Murcutt, who's one of the premier architects of our world. He's the head of the Pritzker Prize and all of this. We were together for a few weeks, and we were sitting there one day, and he said, oh, next week I got to go to the Planning Commission of Sydney. I'm fighting them. And I said, Glenn, you're like a Pritzker winner. You decide Pritzker winners. You're the biggest architect that's ever come out of Australia. What do you mean you're fighting the planning board? He said, oh yeah, I designed this gutter and they won't let me have it. I'm fighting them. And it hit me so hard. Even the biggest architect in the world is still getting drug into the planning commission to fight over a gutter detail. Huh? Nobody said to Bach, hey, Bach, before you play that concert, you need to bring it into these 10 people and we're all going to decide if we like it and we're going to tell you how you should change it and whether you can use those notes or not. We would have never had Bach. If that would have happened to Frank Lloyd Wright and he wasn't a fighter, we would have never had Falling Water. No? So it's just amazing, the sort of downward spiral of architecture in the West, really. When it comes to modalities or forms of architecture or genres like brutalism, these are just representations and reflections of what's happening in society at the time. No? So the age of Enlightenment, the age of brutalism, the age of Art Deco, the age of craftsmanship. These are reflections of the time. And so right now, architecture is reflecting the time we're in. So when you pull off the freeway in America and all you see is McDonald's and box stores and shitty little places and a huge CVS, the architecture is reflecting our time. And it's wild because it lasts longer than we do, right? So we look at buildings from the 1400s of Europe and we're like, we want these buildings again. Well, that was reflecting the time in the 1400s in Europe. That feeling, that tone. 50 years from now, you're going to see our architecture in the West, and it's going to remind us. It's a history book of the time we're living in. So we're living in a time where maybe we don't care so much about ourselves. Maybe we don't care so much about spirituality. Maybe we don't care so much about taking care. Now, you fly to Japan, whole nother world. There's a culture that actually takes the time, makes the details. Their architecture is superb. Their architects are amazing. Kenzo Tange, Tadao Ando. Oh, man. You go to Italy, same thing. They still take the time to be Italian. No? Renzo Piano. I think America, we're searching for our history. We're wondering who we are. No? And in the end, it came out in the architecture. We might not have anything. What is our history? So we spend so much time trying to figure out who we are. When I see Italian architects, they never do that for a second. They have all this time to design because they are Italian. I see it with Japanese. They don't spend a bunch of time wondering who they are. They're Japanese. So they get all this amazing time to just design from that. They're not trying to copy a precedent. They already are it. So they can make modern architecture innately Japanese. The Italians make architecture innately Italian because they've always been it. We're this nation of wondering what we are. And you can see it in the buildings. You can see it in the forms we play. Turns out we're consumerism. That's what we are. That's what our buildings are. Consume, consume. Huge plots filled in with thousands of the same houses, all separate from each other. Because that's who we are, consumerists. I couldn't call the Italians consumerists. They're Italians. I don't call the Japanese consumerists because they're Japanese. And they're solid in it. Now, this consumerism, with the aftermath being the architecture that is reflecting that society, we're pushing that out into the world. So now you go to Thailand and you see replicas of our shitty urban development and KFCs and McDonald's and 7-Elevens. And Thailand isn't Thailand anymore because it's trying to be cool like the West. But cool like the West is devoid of anything solid to remember us by. So I think that's what's happened to architecture. It reflects the time you're in and the people using it. And we're in a time where the United States is based on a consumer society, and the architecture is reflecting.
If you don't mind, I'd like to put to you an argument that I heard on this idea of beautiful architecture and how architecture that we think is beautiful is actually not. And I want to get your take on this. The argument goes something like this. When we think about these older times, like the Enlightenment era, we are attracted to the idea, but we don't take into consideration the fact that we also like things that are just generally old. If I took the pyramids of Giza, something that we look on with wonder, and I remade it and plopped it down in the middle of New York,
Las
we would
Vegas.
criticize it. Or Las Vegas. Yeah, we would criticize it as.
They did that. They did that. I've stayed
Of
there.
course.
It's called the Luxor.
Of course. Of course. Where we take we have a fascination for old things, and were we to take those old things and plop them into today, we would just look at it as brutalist and ugly, and oh, this is just another example of modern day architecture. And really, architecture is formed and always has been formed by necessity. So the reason we have things like giant glass buildings is because we have to account for things like electricity and air conditioning and insulation. We don't have these cute little huts on the mountaintop because we don't need that. And they needed to build little huts with stone and straw in order to protect from the environment. We don't have to worry about that. We have climate controlled buildings. What do you make of this argument that there is no such thing as beautiful architecture? It's just we are attracted to things that are old.
I think we as a culture, and I'm taking your we as Americans, us. We as a culture, I'll go back to the last thing I said. We are desperately searching for some foundation of a past. We don't have one. Our past is we came over on a boat and killed everybody. That's it. That's kind of not a great thing to fall back on. So we look at older things, especially from Europe, because that's where we're from, and we see it has a past. And it reminds us that we have a past. And we connect to it so easily. Huh? And when those things were being made in Europe way back when, whether it was Michelangelo carving something or it was Bach making music, we immediately can connect into it because it's solid and has a past. And it turns out it's our past. Huh? When we try to recreate that, let's say we recreate that past, like everybody right now wants to redo Art Deco and bring it back, redo the Renaissance and bring it back. It's the craziest thing ever. Because even if I took the palace from Paris and built it in Napa County in California, everybody'd go, ooh, that's fucking lame. Because we don't have any connection to it. It's just a replica of something put in a land where we have no past. No? And so I think there's this diligence we need to have right now and sort of search for what do we rely on? What is our past? And some people will say, well, we're the people that came in and transformed America, and that's our past. Well, no, we're really the people that came and chopped down 98% of the trees, kind of fucked everything up, to be honest with you. That isn't a good thing to rely on. The other thing is when they built in Europe in the past, the people, the actual people's hands, putting the stones in place, painting, making the windows, making the doors, that was their whole being. They made doors. That was their whole being. There wasn't all this other stuff they were doing. It was a singular action. I'm a stonemason. I'm a wood carver. I'm a shoemaker. And you put all of your inspiration and all your human being into that. Now we have a job. I'm a carpenter. We go do that for 8 hours a day, and we don't even really give a shit. We just need the money so that we can live. Such a huge difference. I'll just say a little bit. Now, Frank Lloyd Wright, I think, is one of those people who found a foundation. He went to Europe a lot. He went to Japan a lot. He found a foundation and brought that to America. And he built American buildings. And we still look at them. The amount of Frank Lloyd Wright pictures I see on X a day is insane. Because he did the work. He believed it. It was all he did. And he made sure when his buildings got built, everybody on site thought the same way. The craftsmen would live on site. John Lautner was one of his project architects. John would go to a project and live on site while the building was being built. If you read any stories about buildings being built in Europe ages ago, that's the same way they did it. If you read about the pyramids getting built, that's the same way they did it. Now it's just a job out there. The architect draws the plans, sends them out, never looks at the building again. The workers are all just going to work. The guy who commissioned the design is just concerned with the ROI, honestly. So you go from everything was about the craft. The whole life was about the craft. Leonardo da Vinci's whole life was about craft. To a life now, which is about trying to get by, trying to make some money. I went to a project just recently, and they said, they built this Frank Lloyd Wright building that he had designed. It never got built. They built it over there. I went from 200 yards away. I cried. It was so inspirational that somebody had done this. From 2 feet away, I cried because it was the worst construction I've ever seen. Every detail sucked. They literally damned this man's design into the ground. That's kind of the Western culture. Look at it from over here. It looks great. get a little closer, it doesn't look so good. So you mentioned Bach writing pieces in buildings. Huh? Let's say a church. Let's say that church took 150 years to build. How many human beings put their spirit, their soul, through these physical things, my hands, into those stones, into that paint, into that floor? Every day they are praying because they are building it for God. Oh, man. Then people walk in there every day, footsteps and prayers and footsteps and prayers for another couple hundred years. That building's just humming in reasons for being there. You still see it in Asia with the temples and the pagodas and stuff. Bach walks in and he's an open, porous human being, feeling the whole of his life. There's no way for him to make that music otherwise. And he walks into that church. I bet he cried more than once. And he gets to sit down and feel hundreds of years of prayers, hundreds of years of belief. Whether you believe in that God or not, it doesn't matter. It's the human energy in that building. And he needed a power source. And a power source is you walk into one of those buildings and it's in it. When I pray in a building, the stones suck it up and keep it. All those prayers are in that building. All of them. All of those footsteps that went around that pagoda are in that pagoda. You go to Yangon, Burma, and you walk around the Shwedagon Pagoda, which has been there for 2,500 years, with people walking around it and praying. As soon as you step on that platform, you don't have to be Buddhist. You don't have to be anything. You know it. Huh? And I think that is really this separateness that the West is having right now. We all want to be separate. Back in Europe, they were building and they were together. Asia people lived together. Somehow in the West, we've decided to be separate. My house, my car, my fence. Some people don't even know their neighbors after 10 years. Huh? That all goes into this sort of stew pot of the time we're living in right now and the things that we're creating. No? The big art movement on earth right now is AI. Whew. Uh-oh. So now we're designing through this portal from somewhere that has no base. Oh my God. What's the architecture going to look like now? Well, it's going to look like Frank Lloyd Wright because you're going to tell AI to design the building in the style of Frank Lloyd Wright. But is it going to have any heart, bones to it? Because it's not actually coming from that source. So the more we become separate, the more we continue to believe that a consumer society is what we really are, the more distance we're going to get from putting things around us that actually have some meaning and some precedent for the future. And that's what we're all craving, right? So I think it's individually each of us to be the Bach, to walk into those spaces, to remind ourselves why we're here, and then to live that life. There's no time to have things be bad. Oh, but I can't afford a 3-bedroom, 2-car garage house. I only have this much money. Well, build 1 bedroom and no car garage and make that 1-bedroom house so damn good. Your whole family can live in it with such pleasure. But a 3-bedroom puffy house with a gate and a fence and that's made out of like cardboard doors, you know, this every time you touch the door, it doesn't feel like anything. And your kids are growing up in it. Oh, no. So I think we're just sort of compounding the problem right now. And I think the way out of it, like you said at the beginning of this, is through architecture. I also think it is through music. I think it is through art. Architecture houses those things. Architecture is the thing that houses the artist, that houses the musician. Whoa, Bach knew that. Now he's going to walk into places and make music from those places, plug himself in and just be the conduit, and then write it down furiously, not even knowing what the hell he's doing because he just plugged himself in. We need that architecture again in the West. How it's going in the West right now, I'm not sure we can get there. There's a few people like me, very few, like fighting tooth and nail for it. But it takes a whole hell of a lot of money, actually, and a whole hell of a lot of gumption and some good design and all the things we've been talking about to actually create even just a good doghouse that a dog wants to sleep in, right? So I think there's this whole shift that is starting to arise and awaken us to the fact that, yes, the architecture is this thing that is the precedent, is the thing that manifests itself. And we come through that and make art through that. Beautiful.
I want to pick up on 2 points, one on AI and then one on the actual human body. One of the issues I have with AI art is that it is disconnected from reality. It is me sitting at my computer and typing into Chat GPT or Grok, generate this image based on blah, blah, blah. And it generates something, but there's almost an anti-human element to it. One of the things that I like about being a musician is the physical connection I have, particularly to acoustic instruments. There's a direct connection I have not only to the instrument but to music. And in architecture, I know, and you correct me if I get any of this information wrong, but at one point, architects were building using literally their hands for measurements, like the thumb to the tip, and when we say things like a foot. And I'm very interested in this connection that we have in the human body to, in this case, buildings, like literally measured using the human body. Can you talk a little bit about that?
Sure. I think you're spot on. I've played music for 45 years. I play real wooden flutes. I play acoustic guitars. I played drums. I've never played a set of electric drums, and I've never played an electric guitar, ever. I don't know why I would. I'm in the instrument. It makes sound because I'm making the sound, period. You see Willie Nelson's guitar, Trigger. It's got every song and every person he's ever played with and every tear he shed and every laugh and every joke he smoked is in that guitar, right? Stradivari. Why do people still pay insane amounts of money for one of his violins or cellos, right? Because his hands did it. His whole being made it. And then everybody that's played it since is in that instrument. And sometimes you'll hold one. I played a 1942 Martin the other day. Oh my God, right? It's something else. Huh? So when it comes to architecture, in the old days, the architect was one of the sort of supreme beings of society. And their whole life was given to architecture. In India, it's called Vastu Sastra. It's one of the 7 Vedas that make up a holistic society. And a Vastu architect just does that only. Some don't even get married or have kids. It's only what they do. I've studied with musicians here, another one of the Vedas. No wife, no kids, nothing, 65 years old. They do music only, and they only do it with their human being. So this was the way architecture was. This was how building was, right? Everything in this world is related to everything else, right? The West all of a sudden is proving all these ideas. This geometric symbol is old and it comes from this and we've been using it forever. The Indians laugh. They're like, yeah, we figured that out 10,000 years ago. No? We're starting to refigure out what everybody's already figured out, and then we forgot. Part of what that is my human being is directly related to all things. So this measurement is a real measurement. This measurement from my elbow to the end of my fingers is a real measurement. I can make something level with water in an air bubble. No, they've been doing this forever. A plumb bob tells me how straight something is. No? The more we start relying on things outside of us to actually make the things we're trying to make, the further away from the thing we get. So right now, AI is a big deal because I can go on and say, make me a house. Here's my site. Show them the site in the style of Frank Lloyd Wright. I want plans, sections, elevations, and engineering. And 10 minutes later, you'll have the whole package. What's an architect to do? Huh? AI artists can punch in a bunch of stuff and a beautiful image pops up and you post it. So I looked into AI art, hundreds of AI artists. I found 3 that were actually an artist using AI as the tool. Thank God for those 3. Otherwise, I would just discredit all AI art. But I actually found real artists using AI. 99% of them are just people using AI and making an image. You can tell when an AI image is actually an artist. It has balance. There's something in there that has a little bit of soul even. So I started talking to the AI artists saying, what's your process? I know my process. My process for architecture is to be as human as I can be, to understand the place as well as I can, and then to shut all the other stuff out and let myself be the architect. That's how they used to do it in the 1400s. That's how they used to do it before Christ was born. Now they just plug it in. When I talk to these AI real artists, and their process is almost identical to mine, but instead of my hand on a piece of paper, they're putting this thing into the computer, and they talk about this latent environment that nobody knows about. There's these areas inside of AI that no one has any idea about. And I started thinking, is that the same place between my brain and my hand where my brain stops and my hand creates? Is that latency in there why these AI artists are good? It's got me thinking, where in AI is that latent space? What is that? Nobody knows. It's just there. And so I'm curious about AI art right now. I'm a little concerned about AI taking away architecture. I'm a little concerned about it taking away art. But to see a few artists actually digging in there, because if you ask me, where does the design come from, D? I'm just going to say God. That's the best answer I have. Where did Bach's cello suites come from? God, I don't know. But they came through him, and they came through a clean conduit. And that conduit didn't have any electrical device. It was all this. And wood. You play a drum, it's wood and a goat skin. You play a cello, it's wood. Huh? It's made by human beings. Their prayers are in it. These things I think are really important. Can AI figure out how to get that into it? Or is the same place I'm pulling my stuff from actually in AI too? And that one is really catching me right now, is what's in that AI? Because all the best AI and most incredible AI people say, we actually don't know. It's doing things we don't know. Whoa. That's the same thing I could say. I don't know. I don't know where it came from. I'm just doing things I don't know. They're too similar right now for me to discredit AI. So if I can figure out where the artist and the AI meet, and might be some communion in there, and then the output is actually this visual image, that's art to me. But 99% of what's going on in AI art right now is just, I'm just going to say it out, like kids spending a couple $100 on a program and thinking they're artists. That's not art. So I'm hoping there's somewhere that it all connects. And I'm hoping that connection is the same place that we connect with music, that we connect with spirituality. And that would be the greatest thing, that AI has something we don't even know about yet.
Could you tell people what crux framing is, or crux framing in buildings?
What is it? Explain
Crux
it.
framing, where the arches connect together, like wooden, almost like wooden poles that connect together. I had seen something pinned on your X profile that it seemed like a lot of people really gravitated towards, and it had this style of wooden.
I years ago I had a project, and I long story short, the project was a beautiful project. When I work on projects, they usually take me 3 to 7 years, and I'm on it all day long, every single day. I don't just draw plans and hand them off. I work with every builder, from the guy digging the hole to Sabin Howard doing the Hermes commission, and sculpting one of the most beautiful statues that's ever existed. I'm involved the whole way. Um, on that particular project, this client was fantastic, and he was open to doing some things. And so I had a friend that was harvesting wood up in Alaska, and said, man, if you ever get a really rich client, let's take them up to Alaska. Let's go out in these boats and let's grab these huge Sitka spruce falling down trees off of these islands. We'll bring them back to the mill and we'll actually mill them. I said, well, I got a rich client, dude. Let's do this. So we did. We took it up there. We went in the boats. We got the logs. My client actually worked the sawmill. It was amazing. Those are the beams in that picture. Now, when I got all that wood and I was thinking about my client, I had been inundated with this person and this site for now nearly a year. I went down, I live at Lake Tahoe, and that's where this project was. And I was sitting out on the lake one night. And you know when the clouds come in and it makes, like, if you're sitting on a lake and all of a sudden it makes the lake so dark, this kind of blue that is just ethereal, right? And then all of a sudden the clouds part a little bit and these sunbeams just come out of the sky and hit this darkness and just create light between dark. I thought, that's what I need to do with that wood. I need to have it shoot down from the sky like God and land in this man's living room. I need him to walk into God every time he walks into his house. The very, very powerful man, this man I was designing for, very powerful, makes big decisions on earth. I thought if I could get him to walk into God every day, he would make great decisions for the rest of the world. So I
Wow.
thought, I'm going to make this happen. So if I'm going to have God coming down into this man's house, what am I going to do? Bolt it to the floor? Bolt it together? That's crazy. I can't do that. I have the most pure wood, the most rare wood on earth. Nobody else can get this because I went and did it myself. I can't bolt the sunbeam down. That'd be crazy. I remembered my engineers coming to me and saying, we don't have wood long enough, D, to make these arched sunbeams you want. We're going to have to do this, this, and this. I said, no, we can't do that. And then they said, there's no way to engineer it. We can't do it. 7 engineers I had on staff, brilliant people. They all told me, no, can't do it. I basically said, fuck off, guys. I went and put myself in a little cabin up in the woods and said, I won't come out until I figure it out. 7 days I sat in that cabin, didn't leave. And on the seventh day, I figured it out. I took this old detail I had learned in Bali when I was making huts for monks in Bali, the way that they spliced two pieces of wood together. I thought, that's it. That's the perfect splice. Now, how do I hold it together? I could just hold it together. They use one piece of rattan. I'll just use one piece of blue steel. Okay. Now, how does a sunbeam get strapped to the earth? It doesn't. It just falls on the earth. So why don't these beams just fall on the earth? A sunbeam's heavy enough to stay. These beams should be heavy enough just to stay. If I just put them on the ground and lean them up against each other and put in a ridge beam, put a blue strap around it, it should fucking work. Packed up my stuff from that little cabin, went back to my office, sat down with my 7 engineers and said, that works. They all said, no. I said, just go away. The next day they came, they sat me down and they said, you're right. It does work. So those beams, that whole truss system is all held together by that one steel strap. And then I made sure I didn't even put bolts on that strap. I just put two tension triangles inside there. Because now those sunbeams hit this man's house and he walks through God every day with no interruption. And that's what I was talking about in that picture. And it's a beautiful design, but took, honestly, a year and a half, 2 years of really working on it to make that possible. And all my travels to Europe and flying buttresses that I've studied, and all my travels to Asia and building huts in Bali and in Burma and in Nepal, and it all came together because it's in me. And I was able to process it into being able to put sort of one of the biggest sort of truss designs together that I've ever seen, with no bolts, no nothing, just all weight, the weight of sunlight. That's what I figured. So it worked. So thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Well, I mean, it's an amazing thought. What would the world look like if every single person with influence or power, you think about world leaders, had to, as you put it, walk through God, to acknowledge something that was bigger than themselves, to be in awe of something before they made any big decision? That is such a powerful thought, and I can't think of a better way to illustrate why something like architectural design is so important. I mean, to literally shape your life, to shape other people's lives. Going back to the beginning of this conversation, I've never, I don't know why I've never thought about it in that way before, and I'm just kind of stunned.
Let me go a little bit further with it. You have said architecture is really powerful. It influences us so much. This is the truth. No, this is the truth. I think the other most powerful thing on earth that influences people, either negatively or positively, is religion. No? So when I was young, I thought, how could I change the world? How could I help? How could I do this? And it was such a damning question because it's so big. The problems are so big. But what can I do? Huh? What I realized I could do was make architecture, and architecture really affects people. So when I opened my company back in '92, my first company, I hit the dot-com revolution because I had San Francisco and Tahoe were my offices. And I ended up designing for Larry Ellison, Steve Jobs, Google, big dudes that were shaping the world, right? It was awesome. It was like I was getting to shape the solace of the men shaping the world. I got to be Howard Rourke. It was amazing, right? From Atlas Shrugged. And then I got into what is spirituality, And we each choose a path. That's what we do, Christian, Muslim, unless you're sort of born into it and you don't get a choice, which I don't think is a good idea. My path ended up in meditation and sort of the Buddha's teachings, because they weren't a religion. It was just, here's how you do this. And so when I started teaching meditation, those are the two things I do. I make architecture and I teach meditation. Let's say when I went to Burma, I said, I'm going to start just teaching every week at this 2,500-year-old monastery, because I've been a monk and everything, so they allow me to do that. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to make it so that everybody that comes is like the head of the UN, the head of Save the Children, the head of all of them. And if they sit with me once or twice a week and I'm helping them, I'm doing the same thing I was doing as an architect. So I set out to do it. Turns out one night I'm sitting there, there's 100, 150 people sitting there, and there's the head of Save the Children. There's the head of UN OCHA. There's the head of the UN. Sitting there, listening to me teach them Dharma and meditation. One day I woke up and there was this huge Rohingya crisis where these poor, destitute people that have no home in Burma were getting in these boats and just washing out into the sea. You might have read about it. And they find them out there. Some die, some they turn around. And there's the head of the UN on the cover of, I think, Time magazine, standing in a boat full of these refugees. And his arms are up like this and his eyes are clear. I have lunch with that guy once a week. He comes to my teachings every week. And I thought, those clear eyes and him standing there, I helped do that. I helped shape it so that this man didn't lose his mind. He was actually able to be present. And when we're present and we're not losing our mind, which most people are doing all the time, we make really good decisions. Now, Steve Jobs was a great meditator, Buddhist kind of guy. I love being around him because he made such good decisions because they came from such a solid base. No? So architecture can do that. Spirituality can do that. And then you add in music and art, which go inside spirituality and architecture. Voila. Now we're talking about a really good life. If people can make decisions from that life, whether it's about lunch or your kid or tariffs, all right, anything, then we'd be making better decisions. So I think you're right. It's the more we can be making decisions from a place that is more grounded with God, or however you want to say it, the more that Bach can be influencing how we actually are a human being. Not just I like to listen to Bach, not just I went and saw them do a Bach piece last week and I'm sitting in the theater crying, but what do I do with it when I leave the theater? How do I make decisions from that feeling I had when I was playing Bach's cello suites? How do I raise my kid with that feeling and now I'm a dad? It's a really, I think if we could go back in time, it isn't to copy the architecture, or to copy the music, or to copy the details, but it's to look into how are those people getting to those things? And they were getting to those things by being connected. So we have this amazing ability as architects to influence. We have this amazing ability as spiritual people to influence. You know, a priest can influence a congregation like nothing else. It's amazing. No? If that priest is well set and is full of actual God, then that influence is just such a bright light. But we also see what happens when it turns dark, right? So the idea for me was to create things, architecture, where you live, where you laugh, cry, have babies, get sick, die, have sex, get in fights, have happy birthdays, all going down inside your architecture. Dude, this might be the most important thing on earth. And it turns out it is. So that was the impetus early in my career at 15 years old, seeing those two columns in the Siena Duomo. Just voila, this is what architecture can do. Good stuff.
The last question I always ask my guests, and in this case, I mean, you've done such a great job of already laying so much of this out already. But it's a great way to end a podcast, I think. What is a positive vision for the world that you, in this case, you, Damon, would like to manifest?
Damn, good question. Maybe I should have watched all the way through your other podcast so I could have got this
Right? Yeah.
question. I would have prepared
Yeah.
myself more.
Yeah.
I am very positive about the future of this world. I am very positive about the future of humanity. Very positive. Um, I think this time we're living through right now is just a small bit of time. I think humans learn lessons pretty damn well. If you touch something really hot and burn yourself, you're not going to touch it again. No, I think we're burning ourselves pretty good right now. I think something positive is seeing folks like you, folks like yourself who is playing music, who is about to have a baby, who's going to play music for their baby, um, who's going to, there are people out there still farming and home farming and permaculture, and there's people holding on to the truths. And I think these people are the heroes of our world right now, and they give me so much inspiration and positivity for the future of this world and humanity. I'll take up that role as the architect, and I'll try to train the young ones with that inspiration. I won't get a phone. I'm not going to do the AI thing. I'm in AI talks all the time with some of the biggest guys on earth, but I don't want to use it. 10 years from now, we're going to need an architect that's never had it in their body, that's never had the phones and all of it in their body, that remembers how to really do it. That makes me positive because I see you doing this, what you're doing right now. I get on X and I get to see people around the world growing vegetables and people honoring trees and people calling out shitty architecture and people wondering, how can we do it better? That is inspiring, you know? I mean, you get a single social media platform that opened up the world a little bit and you can actually go, oh, there are some left. Elon Musk, my God, what an inspiring human being, you know? Someone that had a dream and took action for the right reasons. He's got morals, no? And I think if we can follow in the footsteps of those people, people like you, maybe people like me, people like Elon Musk, I think we have some real hope for the future. I really do. Um, at some point, nature is such a beautiful thing. At some point, nature always evens out nature. Always. There is never once that hasn't happened in nature. We are nature. Nature is going to help us even and balance ourselves out too. It's our job to keep remembering why. And if, as long as there's people like me, you, Sabin Howard, Elon Musk, these people in the world, we will remember. We're remembering for the rest of humanity. And I think that's so incredibly positive, so inspiring to me. So to keep doing it, to keep putting things on earth that inspire people, for you to keep playing music and people show up to your concert and get to cry. I got to listen to Bach cello suites. That inspired my whole day the other day. I mean, really, so that's inspiring to me. That's positive. So I really believe the future of this earth and this humanity is well sound. Well sound. But I also think Elon I think Elon should shoot rockets to Mars still, just in case. Just
Oh
in
yeah.
case.
Yeah. I mean, what a cool thing to do, At the very least,
Yeah.
it's like, wow,
Yeah.
look what humans are capable of.
Yeah, and a few years ago I was like, yeah, that's crazy. And now it's like, good idea, just in case we really are getting a bad situation, just in case. Okay.
Damon Zumbroegel, thank you so much for your time. It's been an absolute pleasure.
Absolutely. I think you're doing a great job. And I hope everybody out there enjoyed it.